Hey guys, so I debated whether to do this week because I'm feeling a little under the weather. Just kind of sinus issues. At any rate, we're gonna get to this. We're gonna talk about last week in wrestling, specifically Monday Night Raw and Smackdown. So let's dive right into it. And there'll be parts we won't really cover too much. We started with both the Judgment Day and the Bloodline in the ring. More specifically, Jimmy and Jay and Solo, of course, with Paul Heyman. And then the Judgment Day came out. So, the idea behind this is that they are kind of forming a pact for the day, if you will, to essentially take care of each other's problems. So the matches that were set up for this is that Solo was going to take on Rey Mysterio, and then Finn, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio would take on Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Matt Riddle in the main event. So that's kind of the two matches that were set up for this kind of coming to terms, so to speak, for the day. One interesting thing throughout this is that you had Rhea Ripley and Solo staring each other down. What that means for the future, not really sure, but it's something that we're going to keep in mind because it's going to come back up at some point. I feel like it's going to set something up. So, our first match, Rey Mysterio loses to Solo at the Samoan Spike. It was an okay match. It wasn't exceptional, necessarily. It keeps Solo's at least televised undefeated streak. The rest of the LWO come down afterwards when Rey was being attacked. We then had the Raw Women's Champion come down. She took on Dakota Kai. So this brought in kind of a new dynamic. So Bayley and Io, of course, are there at ringside for this match. It is not a championship match. It went okay. However, Bianca did pick up the win, but Dakota was not happy with that. She was very disappointed with herself. And Io Sky and Bayley attempted to kind of console Dakota. She wasn't really having it. So the question here with the draft coming up this Friday, at least the first day of it, do they split Damage Control? They could. And here's the thing, I don't know that they have really used Damage Control to its full potential. I think it is getting to that point where it is okay to split them. But I think they could have done a lot more with them, and they chose not to. And now at this point, I don't know if they can really backtrack. So, next we have Cody Rhodes coming on out. Interestingly enough, so he is calling out Brock Lesnar, but he is not cleared to compete. Cody is not cleared to compete after the week prior. So, Adam Pearce is trying to get him to leave the ring. He's not having it. This is really kind of getting that tension going for those two for that match. I think that's going to end up being a pretty decent match, honestly, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. So that ended up with a big brawl, security, Cody trying to take out security to get to Lesnar. So we then had Seth Rollins and The Miz. It was an okay match. It got both of them on the card. Seth ended up picking up the victory. It got both of them on the card. Both of them are good competitors. I don't know that this is supposed to be leading towards a feud for them necessarily. So we will see. We then have Bobby Lashley coming out to take on Austin Theory. So this is setting up what should be a decent backlash match. And they may go this route. So it ended up with a no contest as Bronson Reed comes out. I like what they're doing with Bronson Reed. Honestly, he was not necessarily one of my favorites in NXT. But he's growing on me here on Raw. And I think this will be a good spot to really get him going. So, the match that I believe they're looking at having is a triple threat for the United States Championship. Bobby Lashley, Austin Theory, and Bronson Reed. This should be good. I'll maybe go into it later when we get closer to Backlash as to who I think ends up coming up with a victory there. But we then have Trish Stratus come out to go into why she treated Becky Lynch like that, why she turned on her. Essentially saying that she was the reason for the women's revolution and that no one told her thank you, that kind of thing. She did clear up that she was the one that attacked Lita. I'm not necessarily super surprised with that. I don't necessarily agree with this, and I get it that it's partly because she's a heel, but at the end of the day, one person doesn't start that. One person is never responsible for that, right? Because you need two opponents, so there has to be at least two people truly involved in that, right? And for Trish to come out there and say that she was solely the reason behind it is not possibly true. Because the other women at that time, more importantly Lita, were a huge part of that too. Trish would not have had someone to go out there. When she says she was the first woman to main event Monday Night Raw, not true. She had to have a partner. If she was going to main event it, she had to have a partner, and that partner was Lita. Right? So she herself is not giving Lita the respect that she deserves when it comes to that. So I get that it's her trying to give her character heat. I just, because of the way that my brain is trying to make sense of it, and it doesn't make sense to me, I didn't really care for it, I guess. So we have Sonya Deville and Chelsea Green then that took on Mia Yim and Candice LeRae. This was an okay match. It got these four women on screen. Gave them some time. Liv and Raquel are at the announce table. They want to get a look at who they're going to be competing against on Friday. Sonya Deville and Chelsea Green pick up the win there. Kind of gives them more momentum going into their championship match. Then lastly we have our main event, which is the Judgment Day, Balor, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio taking on Matt Riddle, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn. Here's where things get a little interesting. So there was a pact earlier in the night between the Bloodline and Judgment Day to essentially take care of each other's problems. Solo did his part, right, in taking on Rey Mysterio and picking up a victory there. However, Riddle, Sami Zayn, and Kevin Owens pick up the victory here. This ends up meaning that Judgment Day did not hold up their end of the bargain. So we end up with a pretty decent brawl afterwards when the Usos come down with Solo, and then the Latin World Order comes down. So you have a ton of people just brawling to close up the show. So that kind of sets things up there for that 6-man tag at Backlash. You're going to have the Usos and Solo taking on Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Matt Riddle. Should be a pretty decent match. I thought that was a pretty decent way to close out the show, actually. Okay. So let's start with SmackDown from last week. We have first a match, Rey Mysterio versus Santos Escobar taking on Finn Balor and Damian Priest. This was a decent match. Not great, but I mean it got them on the show. Kind of carried forward that feud there. So Finn Balor and Damian Priest picked up the victory there. They're keeping Judgment Day looking strong, even though they did end up with the loss on Raw. I don't think that hurt them necessarily. So we then had Braun Strowman and Ricochet taking on the Viking Raiders. And I like that they're doing this because you need to start getting some of those other tag teams on the card, right? We need to start seeing more of them. So that was nice. So Ricochet and Strowman ended up defeating the Viking Raiders. It was a good match. It was. We then had our championship match. The tag team champions, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, took on Sonya Deville and Chelsea Green. This one, I don't really know where they're necessarily going specifically with it. I didn't expect Chelsea Green and Deville to come up with a victory, but I didn't necessarily think they were going to go with the finish that they did. So there was water involved, and Raquel might have, without the referee seeing, given Liv a hand to keep the pinfall there for the 3 count. I don't know that this is an attempt at trying to potentially turn them into heels at all. Just using some underhanded tactics which is okay. It is not the end of the world for them to do that. So what this does do, though, it's leading to another match, right? So we are going to get another championship match between them, and I do believe it is going to end up being inside of a cage. I feel like it's going to end up being a cage match between the two tag teams. We then have the Intercontinental Champion, Gunther. He is putting that title on the line against Xavier Woods. I like the way Gunther has been doing this. They've kept him as the champion. He's been winning clean. But because of his dominance, it's not necessarily hurting the competitor. And it has been so many different competitors, right? So we're getting to see people getting these opportunities that don't necessarily. Someone like Xavier Woods, who I would like to see have an Intercontinental Championship run. But not meant to be right now, and that's okay. It was a really good match. They both are hard hitters. Gunther ended up winning, so he keeps that championship, which is fine. We will see. I like that Gunther does continue to give out these opportunities, and he continues to attempt to defend that title and prove why he is one of the best Intercontinental Champions. We close off the show with a no disqualification match. Matt Riddle against Solo Sikoa. This was a decent match. It got both of them onto the card. Solo, of course, picks up the victory. Of course, there was Sami Zayn was there at ringside with Kevin Owens, and both of the Usos are out there. It really kind of moves that storyline along, which is good. That's good for them. So that is Raw and Smackdown for last week. I am going to attempt to try to get things more in time next week. Again, not feeling super great, so we will see. Speaking was kind of rough, feeling for me, but we will talk about this week of wrestling this weekend. We had a big Monday Night Raw, so we'll talk about that next week. Alright, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.